All right then, so good afternoon everyone. Hope you all enjoyed Ian and Andy's lunchtime keynote. I am one of the individual founding members of ID Pro. I remember joining while I was sitting in the keynote last year and running over to Justin saying, "Justin, the sign up worked," and having him go, "Oh, thank God it didn't crash." So, we've come a long way in a year. Okay, first test of the day. The thing works. Okay, I'm so happy. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Hunter. I am a principal program manager inside of Microsoft. I am part of the customer success team for Azure Management, which means that I am embedded with the nice folks who build the products and the services, but my role is customer facing. So I work with folks like you around how to deploy Microsoft services, identity services, cloud services, Azure Management services, and to get feedback from you around what works, what doesn't work, what could be better, so that I can then bring that feedback back to my project management, back to my developers, and talk to them about ways to go and make their products better. So, when you saw this presentation and when you saw this title, I'm willing to bet about half of you got the joke. And the other half were going, "Why is she talking about cake? I don't understand." So let's clear it up for the non-cake understanding people. There is this really wonderful video game called Portal. It's been around for a number of years. There's actually two of them now. There's Portal and Portal 2. And it is one of those just amazing video games that is extremely smart and asks the user, the player, to go through these varying levels of increasingly diabolical problem and puzzle solving. So, for example, if you are a parent of a teenager and you have never heard of this game, I actually strongly recommend that you go and check it out, because it's kind of amazing. But there's a twist, because there always is, which is that if at any point you fail one of the problem-solving exercises, your in-game character dies in really innovative and spectacular ways. The reason, at least in-game, that you continue to try to solve these puzzles is because the organization that is putting on these puzzles is promising you cake. So if you continue to try to solve these puzzles, even though you are dying in spectacular ways, at the end of the test, at the end of the puzzle, you will get cake. Deep in your hearts, you really know that you're not getting the cake. And ultimately, the twist of the game is that you discover that the cake is a lie. Now, how does this equate to cloud services and cloud service adoption? So, as someone who works for a cloud service provider, but who is also an InfoSec professional, when I have conversations around cloud adoption with organizations, particularly organizations who are just beginning their cloud adoption journey, just beginning their conversations around cloud adoption, I find that we have kind of these repeatable sorts of conversations and these repeatable sorts of objections that we hear to the process of cloud adoption that, in a strange sort of way, map fairly neatly to the 5 stages of grief. There's a statement to be made there. I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it. And the reason that this happens, I put at least a portion of the blame, as it were, at the feet of the cloud service provider. Full disclosure, I work for one. And the reason for that is because when we talk to our customers, we maybe historically we've laid it on a little thick around the super shiny, happy flower total benefit of the cloud in terms of you're going to get this absolutely perfect story of security and usability and everything's going to be happy, shiny flowers and great. We're talking to security professionals. Security professionals tend to be very smart. We are also born skeptics. It's kind of why we have the job. And so it's kind of our nature as a security professional, when we hear the stories of happy, shiny flowers and goodness, to immediately go shields up, to immediately have that bogon filter kick in. And in some ways this is good, but in some ways it can actually work to our detriment. And that's really what I want to spend a lot of time talking about today is, as a security professional, when we are thinking about securing our organizations, securing our infrastructures, and when our business starts coming to us talking about cloud adoption, if our default answer is no, if our default answer is that shields up, no, I'm not going to do your stinky cloud thing because it's the cloud, how can it possibly be secure? We are extremely well-meaning when we say these things. I have yet to meet a security professional who is handing me objections to cloud adoption solely for the purpose of being obstinate. These are people who are deeply passionate about their jobs, they are deeply committed to the security of their organizations, and they are very much invested in continuing to ensure that security. And they're looking at the new shiny that's coming along and they're saying, well, it's a new shiny, I don't trust it. When we think about sort of the evolution of IT services over the years, it's kind of interesting to think about the idea that some of the tropes that play out in stories of cloud adoption, in some ways they're very new, but in some ways we're dealing with patterns, in terms of human patterns, that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years. In one of my very first IT jobs, doing desk side support 20 years ago, walking out of a meeting one day and overhearing someone saying something about the new Wi-Fi network in the marketing department, and then I took another 3 steps, and then I went, what Wi-Fi in the marketing department? Because they came to IT and said, we need Wi-Fi, and IT said no. So some dude went to Best Buy and picked up a $20 WAP and plugged it in under his desk, and poof, marketing had Wi-Fi. 20 years later, same thing is happening around something like adoption of Dropbox, or adoption of Salesforce, or adoption of any number of cloud services. The marketing folks, or whatever business unit it was, came to the IT people and said, we want to adopt this tool because it will make us smarter, better, faster, more efficient, more effective at meeting our customers' needs. And the IT people said no, because security. Well, what happened? They went and signed up for Dropbox, and they possibly didn't even need a credit card to do it. And so this kind of led me to a realization of, as an InfoSec professional, as a security professional, is this default answer of trust no one, default no, are we really acting in our organization's best interests? And the reason that I say that is because if we continue to maintain this default no, default don't trust the cloud, default don't trust anything, we are removing ourselves from the conversation. We are removing ourselves from conversations that our businesses are having, whether we want them to or not. And if any of you were at CIS last year, Justin Richards in the front row, he did this really great talk about shadow IT adoption. It's out on the YouTubes. You should absolutely go and watch it because it makes some really interesting points. And one of the points that it makes that has really stuck with me is when we talk about security versus cloud adoption, particularly when we talk about that kind of organic adoption of shadow IT cloud services. The shadow IT adoption process, or the shadow IT adoption specter, whatever you want to call it, it's going to win. Kind of a bold statement. The reason I make this statement, and this is a point Justin made a couple of years ago, is that we have an impedance mismatch. We have a process mismatch inside of our organizations. You've got the person in the accounting department. I'll stop picking on marketing for a moment. You've got the person in the accounting department who needs to share information, needs to share files with an external vendor. I've got this file. I have to send it to my vendor. My boss has told me I have to send this file and I have to share this file to my vendor. If I am not able to do that, I'm not doing my job. If I don't do my job, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to be able to feed my family. My kids aren't going to have health insurance. Maybe people aren't quantifying it that explicitly, but somewhere under the covers, that's the conversation that's going on in the back of people's heads. If I don't do this thing that lets me do my job, I can't do my job, my children do not have college tuition. If I do this thing, and it obviates or somehow goes outside of the security people's policy, the security guy is going to be mad at me. You know, the security guy is probably going to be mad about something any given day anyway. Between those two kind of motivating forces, forget technology, talk about human motivation. Which one's going to win? I'm going to feed my family. I'm going to go do the thing. And so as a security professional, if we maintain this very rigid, very strict, absolutely no, there will not be any cloud adoption, there will not be any SaaS, any software as a service application adoption inside of our organization, guess what? It's gonna happen anyway. And the only thing you've done by taking that hardline approach is ensure that it is happening without you at the table, is ensure that it is happening without you being part of the conversation about how can we monitor, how can we apply policy, how can we ensure that people can do their jobs while still maintaining organizational compliance and all of the good things. And if we think about saying that hard no, absolutely no cloud services in my organization versus let's have the conversation. Let's talk about what kind of policies, what kinds of controls we can apply. Which choice is actually making which one ends up being the better choice for securing your organization? In a kind of, if you think about it, kind of pull back to the sort of holistic viewpoint, maintaining that hardline no, especially in the current age of cloud adoption, and especially given how easy it is for your employees to go out and adopt the services that they need, maintaining that hardline no is actually making your organization less secure, because now you have no visibility, you have no policy, you have no compliance. They are off in the wild, wild west. As opposed to, let's talk about how we are adopting cloud services. Let's use the services that we have in the cloud to better secure the fact that we are adopting the cloud. Let's use the cloud for good. Let's use the cloud for the good of our organization. Kind of reminds me of, going back to the 5 stages of grief. Kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with a CISO. We were talking about, they were very early in their cloud adoption process, and we were talking about, how does your organization do this? How does your organization do that? And I happened to ask him about his organization's device policy. What do you do about mobile devices? What do you do about tablets? What do you do about phones? And the answer I got was, there are absolutely no unsanctioned mobile devices on the corporate network. And spoken in such a way that it brooked no dissent. My first thought was, what color is the sky in your world, and can I come visit? My second thought was, how do you know? Seriously, how can you prove that? How do you prove that negative? And at that point, now having listened to this morning's keynote, I realized that I had become the geek, and I was having the debate with the hippo. And so when we think about ways that we can use the cloud to secure the cloud, spoiler alert, I am going to be giving you Microsoft-specific examples for the next couple of minutes. That is not to say that we are the only game in town. There are, many fish in the sea. I happen to get a really good deal on software licensing, and so this is why I pull my examples from there. If I look at something like infrastructure adoption, if you're looking at lifting and shifting your infrastructure investments from on-prem into infrastructure as a service, into platform as a service, if we look at the ability to take those applications and lift and shift them out from your data center into a cloud data center. A very common objection, a very common concern that InfoSec professionals will have is, I'm losing visibility. I don't have the ability to monitor. I don't have the ability to alert. I don't have the ability to ensure compliance. And that's a perfectly valid objection. And so when you are having the conversations with your cloud service provider of choice, ask them about how they provide visibility, policy, monitoring, governance of their infrastructure as a service, of their platform as a service resources. In the case of Azure, we have this awesome little doohickey that we call Azure Security Center, which gives you this great little dashboard that gives you all kinds of visibility around patch levels and are your subnets sitting inside of network security groups, and do you have your firewalls well well provisioned and well configured. And as the security professional, if you have this kind of a dashboard in front of you, when your application teams come to you and say, hey, we want to go adopt the cloud, hey, security guy, how are you going to make my life a living hell? Your answer gets to be, no, we're good. Get my dashboard to green. Get my dashboard to green, and I will never bother you again. And at that point, it allows us to be a part of the business conversation. It allows us to have a seat at the table, because if the business has determined that we are going to go down this cloud adoption route for all the right reasons, infinite scale up and scale out and cost reduction and all the good things, you want to be a part of that conversation. And you want to have security be baked into that conversation so that you're not running to catch up later. How do we do that? How do we have that kind of conversation? How do we make ourselves a part of the business conversation? And it really gets back to being able to move ourselves away from that very dogmatic, that very draconian, absolutely no, absolutely not, under no circumstances. And it allows us to start talking about how can we apply the right controls in our cloud services? How can we apply the right controls at the right time for the right reasons? You may find yourself in a situation where, let's take multi-factor authentication. Let's take multi-factor authentication as a specific example. You may find yourself in a case where you are prompting your users for multi-factor authentication less frequently, but you're doing it at the right times and you're doing it for the right reasons. Laura walks into the office every day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 Pacific time, and accesses SharePoint, email, and, okay, Facebook, and did I mention email? And if Laura maintains this behavioral profile, Laura's login experience is going to be very simple and is going to be extremely streamlined. Laura diverges from that default profile, either by way of Laura goes off to her cousin's wedding in Amsterdam, or an attacker has subverted Laura's credentials and is now trying to log in from Uganda at 3 o'clock in the morning. Laura is now going to see an interrupt in her user experience. Although, frankly, that means that the bad guy trying to impersonate Laura is going to see the interrupt in their user experience. Laura's user experience is just going to sail right on through. Kind of another thing that I think about in terms of using the cloud to secure the cloud. So, very common adage in information security, defenders need to be good all the time, attackers only have to be good once. This is true, but in the world of cloud computing, I put an asterisk after it. And the reason I put an asterisk after it is that defenders need to be good all the time. Attackers only need to be good once. If you are going it alone, if you are responsible for your own security measures, for your own security intelligence, for all of your own defense mechanisms, if you buy into the value of a cloud service provider, a cloud service offering, I am not standing here telling you that your cloud service provider of choice is never going to make a mistake, is never going to have a bug, is never going to have any type of issue with their software or with their platform. It's software, bugs happen. The security advantage that you get by going down the route of the cloud service provider is that you now have a really big fish who is extremely interested in solving their problems for all of their customers, not just for you. Anybody remember SQL Slammer back in the 2000, 2001 sort of time frame? It took something like 2 years for all vulnerable internet-connected endpoints to be patched for SQL Slammer. Anybody remember the SAML vulnerability that Azure Active Directory announced on a blog post maybe like 8 months ago? Found something. Yeah, we had the entirety of the Azure Active Directory infrastructure worldwide patched within something like 7 hours. Might have been 5, might have been 9. Not totally married to 7 because I've just blanked on the number. But it gives you the idea of that kind of the kind of orders of magnitude of the levels of protection you're getting by not going it alone. When you have a cloud service provider, an authentication platform like Azure Active Directory that is processing billions of user authentications, that is seeing service telemetry from millions of computers, from billions of emails going into and out of our backbone every day, that gives us this massive aperture of security data that we can apply across the board, that we can apply to all of our customers. I'll give you a more recent example because I'm getting a little tired of talking about Slammer because it makes me feel old. WannaCry, everyone's favorite little WannaCry. Once WannaCry had run its course, once we had solved for the problem that was right in front of us, which was take care of our customers who had been impacted, and once we had a chance to breathe and do a bit of a postmortem, we decided to go back and look at the service telemetry from Azure. Let's go look at the service telemetry from Azure around the time, not just during the attack, but in the couple of weeks leading up to the attack. Let's go back and look at that service telemetry and let's see what it can teach us. And in the couple of weeks leading up to the attack, we found a spike in scanning traffic. And we hypothesized that that spike in scanning traffic was the canary, was the run-up to, or was the trial run to the actual WannaCry attack. Now, from a statistical standpoint, how do you prove that something was causal and not a coincidence? You try to prove the likelihood that it was a coincidence. And our numbers people, I don't pretend to understand how they did it, but they went off and tried to prove that this uptick in scanning activity that we saw in the weeks preceding WannaCry was a coincidence, was an accident. Those were the odds that it was an accident. That's a very small number. And so, when we think about, especially as we are beginning our cloud service journey, especially if you're an organization that is beginning to take those first couple of steps into cloud adoption, but you still want to maintain your security posture, you still want to be able to think about how we can be a part of the conversation, how we can make sure that security is part of the conversation when we talk about cloud adoption. Those of you who were in Brian Poole's talk yesterday afternoon on the conference pre-day, he gave you some really excellent, here are 5 things that you can go do right now today that will increase your cloud security posture in a way that isn't going to impact your user experience. I'm not going to rehash all of them because, quite frankly, I can only remember 2 of them. But you should go and watch his talk and grab his slides and go and do the things he told you to do. But just from a holistic perspective, the way that I think about it, and really the thing I want you to go and do, is to, as security professionals, be open-minded, be willing to have a conversation that is a question and not just a steadfast, dogmatic answer of no. Because if you can have these conversations, if you can ask the question of, what business need are you trying to solve? Okay, now let's figure out how we can bake security into that conversation. Then at that point, something about having your cake and... No, I promised myself I would not tell this joke, so thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Wait, we have time for one small question if you're willing to,
One small question.
to do that. One question, and then we'll get on. We'll have a 7-minute break. Anyone? All right, I'll take that as a no, so thank you very much.
Thank you.